Happy Sabbath, everybody. Good to see everybody on. Good evening, everybody. Glad that you could be with the Conscience and Justice Council tonight. On your screen next to me is Edward Woods III, who is the Council and Justice Council, Conscience and Justice Council chairperson, my buddy, my friend. I follow him into battle every single time. Brother Woody, my brother, how you doing tonight, man?
Well, Dr. J, Pastor J, as they call you affectionately, just happy to have you here. We have a very important topic, We are here to talk. I repeat, we are here to talk about systems of oppression, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you. Systems of oppression, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you. The impetus behind this broadcast is the recent events that have taken place at Andrews University. And we are going to talk about that, not just as a microcosm, but as a microcosm, but a macrocosm as to what's taking place, not in our church, but also reflective of society as a whole. We're going to be putting stuff where you can get more information. We're not here to debate which side, but we're here to provide the facts and also the biblical case. I repeat, the biblical case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's biblical in nature, not political. I repeat, it's biblical in nature, not political. And we're seeing how our church, unfortunately, takes its cues, I repeat, takes its cues from society instead of a movement of the Holy Spirit. And we want to make sure, by the grace of God, that we share resources so that you can have our resources so you can go back, but also a call to action, The Conscience and Justice Council is committed to making sure that you have the facts, the truth about what took place in our church and how we are far behind the activism of our pioneers when it comes to these concerns, with apparently no plan in sight. And so this is not an attempt to bash the church, but it's an attempt to challenge the church constructively to live to the Bible, which is our only creed, in the spirit of our pioneers. It's a crying shame that our pioneers' voices, who have been dead, some for over 100 years, speak loudly from the grave than those leaders that we have today. We're going to look at the accreditation standards and try to give a picture of what's going on. And then we're going to give you a call to action. We're going to provide emails for you to write letters. We're going to provide a place where you can sign up. Timothy Nixon, Dr. Timothy Nixon put something up on change.org where we're going to encourage you, if you feel so inclined, to sign the petition. If you don't want to sign the petition, please at least, I repeat, at least, send emails out to the president of Andrews University, the chair of the board at Andrews University, and our general conference president. We will be providing you those emails so you can make sure that your voice is heard and registered with those who are making those decisions. Once again, we invite you to share with your friends, your family, your friends, your foes, to join the Conscience and Justice Council Today program, where we have some dynamic guests, and I am excited about them. For pound, these are some of the greatest minds that we've had, and it's just good to continue to share the talent that's within and outside of our church as it relates to leaders who are doing great things. I repeat, great things. And I'm just so excited about Venetia Sizell. She is a heavyweight in her own right, a certified DEI expert, a nationally certified DEI expert, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But let me give you her professional bio so you understand who is with us today. Venetia Sizell was with the Michigan Department of Attorney General for over 7 years, where she served as an Assistant Attorney General, Division Chief of Children and Youth Services, Criminal Bureau Chief, and as the Chief of Operations, along with the role of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. In addition to her litigation and transaction experience, she led an office of over 550 staff and attorneys, as well as promoted diversity, equity, and inclusion as the Attorney General's first, let me say it again,
Mm.
first executive diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. Mrs. Sezel is credited with not only serving as the department's DEI officer, but creating the first DEI program in the department's history. She
Mm.
currently serves as an adjunct professor at Thomas M. Cooley Law School. She has joined the department of in 2015, has given hundreds of children a voice by representing the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services in child abuse and neglect cases, zealously advocating on their behalf to achieve reunification while ensuring that her actions always promote children's safety and are in their best interest despite their diverse backgrounds.
That's right.
Prior to the Attorney General's office, Sezel worked for the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office in General Trials Division and Sexual Assaults Unit. As a dedicated public servant, she has been described as a fearless leader in the courtroom and the office. She holds an undergraduate degree from Oakwood University. Hey, Oakwood is in the house. And her Juris Doctorate degree from Western Michigan University Cooley Law School. She is currently licensed to practice in Michigan and Illinois. She immigrated from Kingston, Jamaica to the United States with her mother as an infant and became a U.S. citizen in 2020 and remains passionate about serving all people and creating a sense of belonging for everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring none other than Venetia Sezel.
Amen.
Good evening, everyone.
It's good to
Good
see you.
evening.
Good
Good
to see you.
Ew.
Another pound for pound brother that we have today is none other than the chaplain himself, Dr. Jason O'Rourke. If you want someone to speak truth to power and not to be ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, you want Dr. O'Rourke. If you want someone who's not afraid of letting his light shine and not worrying about what other people think about him, you want Dr. O'Rourke. If you want a true biblical interpretation of the Bible and what it means in today's time, you want Dr. O'Rourke. And we are excited to have someone of his capability and talent in our midst today, all the way from Colorado, Littleton, Colorado area. We want to welcome the chaplain himself, Dr. Jason O'Rourke.
You are very kind. Good evening.
All right.
Amen.
And then
Amen.
I'm not
Amen.
sure if our last guest is ready to jump on board, but we will definitely. There she is. Pastor Jay, take care of this one for us.
All right, I got it. Dr. Courtney Ray. She is an ordained pastor. Yeah, I didn't stutter and I didn't make a mistake. It's not a typo. She's an ordained pastor whose nearly 2 decades of working with congregants and community members led her to pursue advanced studies in mental health to address the needs in this often neglected area. She is an academician working as an adjunct professor at City University of New York, a licensed clinical neuropsychologist. That's right. Founder of Array Psychological Assessments, a neuroscience researcher, and one of the founders, watch this now, of the Society for Black Neuropsychology. Dr. Ray is also a scientist in residence at the New York Academy of Sciences, a prolific writer. If you know anything about Dr. Ray, she is a prolific writer, and she has contributed to numerous publications, including Message Magazine, Adventist Review, and Adventist Today, and is a regular columnist for Spectrum Magazine. Her book, Just Pray More, and Other Church Myths About Mental Health is scheduled for publication next year. Dr. Ray's work in the religious, scientific, educational, and mental health realms. Watch this, intersect at God's calling for her to help facilitate holistic healing and growth in communities, especially among those who have been historically minoritized and undeserved. She is a champion. I'm gonna say it again. She is a champion for all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. She believes it in her heart, in her spirit, in her mind. She is about that life, and we are grateful tonight to have her to be a part of this august panel tonight. Dr. Courtney, my friend, welcome to this space.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Well, we
you. Well,
have just
before
a couple of things that we would like to address before we get going. Obviously, as we shared before, the impetus behind this show is what's taking place at Andrews University with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, what we will start off with is, your first reactions, and then we're going to go through the history of the church as it relates to some of the systemic things that have taken place from the history of our church. We want to address what is DEI so that people can be understanding and educated with regards to that. And after we go from what is DEI, we want to talk about mental health. And then we want to conclude with the biblical imperative with regards to that. It's interesting, but all of us have lived in Berrien Springs. So we all have an experience as it relates to Andrews and, the difference that it has made, the contributions. But there's nothing wrong with challenging constructively what's going on. We're always going to welcome your comments and your questions in the comment section. We're going to do that. Daryl, we will give you an update of what's happening. But what we don't want to do is, this is not an opportunity to talk about make America great again, or make Adventists great again, or talk about who we don't like, or this or that. That's not what we're about. We're about, and it comes in 1 John 3:16 and 18, that our love is not just in words, but in action and in deeds. And we realize that God is trying to save all of us, whether we're indifferent, whether we're the perpetrators, or whether we're the victims. And so, in challenging and being constructive, let us also be clear that we are not going to run away from things, because that's a trick of the enemy, and not saying anything and not speaking truth to power. We are going to speak truth to power, but at the same time, we can be respectful and love. So we kind of want to set the ground rules. So as you put things in a comment, if you don't see your question coming up, that is why, is because we do believe, first and foremost, regardless of what other people have done to us, whether it's systemically, whether it's intentional or unintentional, we individually and collectively have a responsibility of being Christians as God would have us to be, and not what people want us to be. Having said that, Pastor Josiah, I think we probably need to give an overview of what's taking place at Andrews. Do you want to take a stab at that? Or do we want Dr. Ray, or how do we want this to go?
Dr. Courtney, you want to go ahead?
Sure.
All right,
I didn't
Dr.
know.
Courtney, if you don't mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I am a graduate of Andrews thrice over. So, and I also was the alumni of the year in 2020. And so I have a very vested interest in Andrews and what it does and the reputation that it has. And so I keep very close contact with students and also faculty members and staff members who are there at the university, and try to contribute as much as I can to building up the university. And so it really was disheartening to me to find some of the information that was transpiring if you recall, several years ago, actually, even going back further than that, Andrews has had a long history of having a diversity committee that has been trying to ensure that all people who are on the campus feel safe and are heard and have their needs and considerations brought to the table. They worked for decades, really, in trying to ensure that that was a permanent place in the minds and hearts of the administration. And it culminated in 2017 when there was a video called "It Is Time," and in that video, several individuals from the school talked about how it was time for there to be a substantial difference made in the culture of the school to recognize that it's important for minoritized individuals, groups, communities to really feel as if they are valued. And so the president at that time, Dr. Andrea Luxton, was very receptive to that. And all those who know her, who have worked with her, have can testify to her receptiveness as a president and her willingness to hear the faculty, the staff, the students, and their concerns. And so, as a result of that, they wound up having they created the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion as a permanent member of. There was a DEI chair who chaired that committee, and also became later the vice president of DEI. So it was now a permanent vice presidential position. And so for 6 years, that office was occupied by Michael Nixon, and he carried out those duties very well. Worked with not only students but also with faculty and with staff to make sure that the campus was more welcoming, was paying attention to issues of DEI. And I know that we'll define that later, exactly what that means. But many of those things, he made sure that those things were in place. And this past school year, Dr. Luxton retired, and there was a search that was put on for another president. During that time, there were some significant unfortunate kinds of things that happened during that time. There were individuals who were displeased with one of the candidates who was the provost. The provost happens to be Black. And there were people who set up a website and who wrote letters and who had an entire campaign saying that it would actually degrade the campus to have this individual become the president, because they were fearful that it would just be a ploy for diversity and liberalism. And there was a lot of inflammatory language around that was basically coded language saying that they did not want a Black president. And so there were open letters written. It was all very unfortunate. At the end of it, there was another name that was brought, which is the current president, Dr. Taylor, who was brought he was suggested directly to the board. And when his name was brought, there was not necessarily a consensus around his name in the search committee. Nevertheless, the board of trustees decided that they would allow him to take the position of president, and his credentials included past higher education experience, but that was a longer time ago. Most recently, he was working in the GC. He's also First Elder at Triadelphia, which is the same church as our General Conference president, and he came recommended by the General Conference President Hiley. but there were people who were very concerned that this other name, that Dr. Taylor's name, was brought as a result of some of the inflammatory things that were said. And there was a town hall that was created where people were able to ask their questions. And the board of trustees chair, Dr. Arturo Stile, said, no, this was not because of that. This, we chose Dr. Taylor because we think that he is the person for the job. So he tried to tell people that it had nothing to do with any of the inflammatory language or the website or the letters or anything like that, and that the school was still committed to diversity, and there was nothing that was going to change, all of that. But people still had fears that that was the impetus for not having the provost, and so there were some concerns, but there were assurances made. Fast forward to this school year. So Michael Nixon, also at the end of that school year, with Dr. Luxton's retirement and with the installation of Dr. Taylor, there were a lot of different moving pieces. And at that time, Michael Nixon also decided that he was going to take another position elsewhere. And he has expressed his reasons why, and I'm not going to speak for him. He can talk about that. If you ever have him on, he can tell you why he may have made that choice. But at any rate, at the time that vacancy for the VP of DEI was made, there was an interim, or at least what was proposed to everyone as being the interim, having a DEI office chaired by Danielle Pilgrim, who had been one of the campus chaplains and also the pastor of New Life, which is a predominantly Black church on the Andrews University campus. And so Dr. Pilgrim took the job as in the DEI office, and she was not made the vice president, but she was made interim of DEI while the search was being made, or was thought to be made, for the replacement for the VP for DEI. As the school year progressed, many faculty and staff continually asked about whether or not any kinds of motions were being made to fill this VP position, because there was this vacancy, it needed to be filled. And they were kind of not given a lot of answers about that. It was very much, hold on. When the new position was posted, it was not posted as a VP of DEI position. It was now posted as an assistant to the president position. And the description of the responsibilities of that position were drastically changed. The individual was no longer chair of the Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Committee. They were no longer a VP. They answered directly to the president as opposed to being a VP. They now the job description read, and if I'm not sure if it's possible to put the link to the description, but somebody has created a graphic that has a side by side of the VP for DEI, that job description, and the new one. And there's a lot of things that are crossed out. So a lot of the community groups and interpersonal groups were crossed out, and they were not, and equity was also crossed out of the job description. Now it was called the Assistant to the President for Mission and Culture. So there were quite a few things that troubled people, because there were all these fears from before that were happening with the replacement, and now it seemed like it was coming to fruition. I cannot say, I'm not going to speculate as to whether there was a connection or not, but I do know that this was something that people were fearful of happening, and this seemed as if it was a fruition of that. And so here we are, where individuals are now saying, this is all this work that had been the culmination of decades of work of the DEI committee to get a VP position, and all of these different things that were initiated and put into place are now basically dismantled because that position is no longer being considered to be filled. And now it's this assistant to the president position, and people are quite concerned and quite worried. And so there have been town halls on campus. Dr. Pilgrim she has a very open letter where she stated that she felt that she was disrespected by several individuals on the board. Well, not actually several individuals, just basically a couple of individuals whose hostility towards diversity and towards her in a personal way was off-putting, and she felt as if her concerns weren't being heard. She had not been made aware, and like I said, I'm not telling you anything that she has not already publicly stated. She stated that she had not been made aware that the position was going to be changed. She found out like everybody else right before Thanksgiving break. And that was also very concerning to many people, that this new information that there was going to be a new position that came out to everyone right before break. And it didn't give a sufficient time for response. And then again, when students and faculty and staff made kind of their concerns known, there was a town hall that was created, but that was right before finals week, which is just culminated this week. And so there's a lot of concern that there has not been a lot of hearing of the community, that many of the individuals have not had their concerns either heard or heeded. And so this is kind of where we are. Now people want to figure out what are the next steps to try to get those concerns heard in a very serious way.
Whew, thank you so much, Dr. Ray, for that. I know you weren't necessarily prepared for it, but I think you did a good job, because one of the first questions that someone asked was kind of like what happened that we're addressing this issue. A lot of times we assume that people are on social media and they know what's going on. I guess we have quite a few in our audience that wasn't aware that diversity, equity, and inclusion position itself was gone, because just 6 years ago, it was created for a good cause, for good purpose. And so one of my questions is kind of rhetorical for you or the others that will come on later was, what changed between 6 years ago when the board said it was a need and it was a voted position by the board to 6 years later. And I think it's very sad that a person's personality or personal thoughts on a particular issue can sway an entire institution in this direction. Did the need go away, or did the compassion go away? So that's a rhetorical. Did the need for the position?
That's a rhetorical question, but I will say that this was not an institutional decision. So that's important also to note. The president, in talking to the town hall, addressed the faculty, the staff, the students, and he noted that it is within his purview as the president to be able to make these sorts of institutional changes on his own. And so many individuals who are actually on the board, many individuals who are in administration did not know either. So it's not as if this was a change that was a groundswell where many people were saying we don't need this anymore. To the contrary, as I stated, when the position was vacant after Michael Nixon's absence, there was a groundswell of people saying, when will we get someone to fill this? So there was a continual need, and it was expressed continually. But as I said, it was not heeded. So
And it kind of leads me as Dr. Woods comes back in to just highlight real quick for those who are watching or may not be aware, based on 5.3.3 of the board policy manual that Andrews University itself has. It says that the board shall review and approve major changes to the academic administration and organization in the university, including establishment of new schools, departments, and or services, as well as the appointment of academic deans of school, directors of departments and divisions, leaders of the academic support services, etc. And so it really is disturbing um, eh, that there would be a unilateral change that the board did not vote on. It almost sounds outside of policy. And so this is something I know that I've shared in a meeting that we were at with our faculty and staff there at Andrews, and hopefully they have someone in the legal realm that can kind of address that issue. It's sort of a governance issue. No one, whether it be an entity, an institution, a conference, a union, a division, we're normally there are checks and balances, and the board is usually the one that does that. And it's really sad, as someone I shared with some of my friends that I'm an Andrews guy through and through. I didn't go to Oakwood, met my wife at Andrews. Collectively we have about 5 degrees from Andrews, and it's really sad when you see an institution going backwards. When we were so excited about what took place that you shared with Dr. Luxton. So I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Woods and see if he has any follow up for us at this time. You can unmute yourself.
I'll unmute myself. A couple things. When you see these unilateral decisions, I think the thing that jumped out the most is who determines the core values of the institution. Is that the responsibility of the board, or is that the person who may occupy the office of president? When you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not a political issue, as some like to make it. It's a moral issue. And so what happens is, it's like we let Dr. Luxton do it, so now we're going to let Dr. Taylor do it. And when the board speaks like that or gives the authority, it shows you, or it illustrates, regardless of the statements they put out. And they have some accreditation standards, because some are suggesting this is more in line with the accreditation standards and the Three Angels message. I love the Three Angels message, and I believe in the Three Angels message. But the problem that we have is as a result of not a clear understanding of who sets the core values of the institution. So that means after Dr. Taylor leaves, we can have somebody else like Dr. Luxton, and the pendulum will swing the other way. And then when that person leaves, the new president comes in, and the pendulum swings the other way. That's not effective governance. I've served on 3 higher education boards. It talks about, if you want to talk about governance, John Carver is known as the guru when it comes to higher education institutions and governance models. Especially in higher ed, it's different. For whatever reason, some of our institutions of higher education boards think that the way they run a board meeting, a business meeting, is the same way you run a higher education institution. And that's a whole new different animal when it comes to faculty and shared governance. And for whatever reason, it's a challenge. I have to question the amount of professional development and where they obtain that professional development and how they engage to be better advocates for students and faculty. Because let me be very, very clear. The faculty make up the school. Let me say it again. The faculty make up the school, and we have to find a way to engage the faculty who are the life, how can I say, who provides the credibility of the school. Obviously, the students are the lifeline because the students are the ones that pay the money. And we need to understand that our students are not kids, but they're adults. They don't need a patriarchal model where you know what's best, but you need to see them as students. And you have to understand that these DEI programs is not wokeism. because they want to get into this wokeism and these culture wars to kind of steer away the discussion, but also understand the impact that it has as it relates to grants, as it relates to accreditation, as it relates to student success. And all you're not hearing anything of that. And I'm saying that's part of the problem with our higher education boards and Adventist institutions is that they run them more like board meetings, executive committee meetings, and business meetings, but not like institution of higher education. You can never, ever delegate the core values or the mission or the vision of the higher education to the president without approval of the board. I mean, that's just something that you can't do. And to suggest that we let Dr. Luxton do it her way, and now we're giving Dr. Taylor the same, is not an effective governance model. And it's, to be honest with you, quite disappointing to hear some of these comments. We're sharing you these comments as they are printed and written. We have put them in the comment section where you can take a look at them. If you look at the Spectrum story, it alludes to what Dr. Ray was sharing regarding the job description. I think one of the things that was crossed out, Dr. Ray, was the biblical imperative. I don't know if you saw that. I mean, that just immediately caught my attention. How can you cross out the Bible when it comes to diversity and equity and inclusion? And the Bible is our only creed. So, I mean, part of that, is a communication function in terms of the rollout with that could have been improved. But let me be very clear. Some of the board members didn't even know. I mean, I informed the vice chairman of the board what happened. I'm telling you, I informed them because they didn't hear it from the president. So it just really kind of opens up a lot of questions. I don't want to speculate and speak to motives because that's not fair. And I wouldn't want the same to do to me. But these are the types of actions and things that have happened in the past that opens up the door for questions as it relates to the sincerity and the intentionality of the move. I'm not going to demonize anyone with regards to that, but I can speak to it from a higher education standpoint. I can speak to how the communication was rolled out and the way it was delivered. How do you post a job posting after you demoted a position and not go out and face the music? I mean, that's just a no-no. I mean, that's just a no-no in higher education. We have, I mean, regardless of where I was, we had Oakwood University, Lansing Community College, Lake Michigan College. We had a rule as a president: no surprises. No surprises. In other words, I'm going to hear it first from him, then hearing it from the public. This is a clear violation of that principle. When your board doesn't even know what you're doing, and the university campus that had input, knowing how critical this was, and the work that Dr. Walter Douglas has done, the work that Dr. Newton Hoylett has done way before this Time video came out, which was very important. Salutations to Michael Polite and his team that put that together. And the response of Dr. Luxon, I want to give her credit, and the response of Dr. Luxon and her team to take students seriously instead of listening to those who don't want to deal with DEI because they see it as political and not spiritual. So those are kind of, my thoughts on the governance in terms of what happens. But if any institution should feel respected, if any institution you should feel welcome, it should surely be our church institution. And I would even say, since Andrews University dubs itself as the flagship institution of Adventism, there's no reason why people should not expect more.
Before we pivot, go ahead, Dr. Ray, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, in terms of value, Andrews has always touted, and still to this day still touts, is #1 ranking as the most diverse campus of higher education in America. Like they will continually post that. There are flyers up. U.S. News and World Report has had Andrews as #1 in diversity for several decades. And that is a selling point of the university. And that's something that the university administration is proud of. And even as there was a picture that was taken by a student that was posted on social media of the letters for diversity, the diversity, equity, and inclusion office, you know, the etching being taken down, and right next to it is a stanchion with the poster that says Andrews University #1 in diversity. And so the juxtaposition of removing the Office of DEI with this promotion of its own diversity was just really very ironic.
Yeah, man. Listen, I think they have violated a lot of things. Again, I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on television, but I also received the accreditation, um, the letter of accreditation, Adventist Accredited Association, and as a part of it, under governance, it says, here's what it says: the administration ensures that in the context of Revelation 14:6, through angel's message, policies and practices of the institution effectively support and foster the inclusion of both men and women of different races, ethnicities, tribes, and castes. That support, effectively support. This is ineffective leadership. To me, it's clear that in my estimation, if I'm reading that and an accreditor, I don't know where this goes, but something's wrong with their accreditation, meeting accreditation standards, if that's what the letter says that they should have. And so I think that thank you, Elder Woods. I think we have to have people who look long and hard at everything now that Andrews does. I'm talking funding. I'm talking accreditation. I'm talking about um, any violations that may or may not have occurred. One of my friends used to tell me that every boss has a boss. Every boss has a boss. No, except unless you're Donald Trump, then you have immunity. You can go down Park Avenue anyway. But we're gonna go ahead and pivot and add some more of our guests. One who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer herself. So, Dr. Woods, I'm gonna let you bring uh, Attorney Cecil in at this time.
All right, we're going to talk with Venetia Sazelle, attorney in her own right and a DEI expert. And then after that, we're going to hear from Dr. Jason O'Rourke, and we're going to talk about some of the history of the church, and then open it up for Q&A. In the chat, I repeat, in the chat, it talks about, and Pastor Jay was sharing that in the chat, it talks about the, what we were talking about, the Adventist statements. I wanted to share that with you, but some of the examples, when it says sample policies and practices that exemplify respect for differences in ethnic background, that encourage and support cross-cultural interaction and understanding. It says, see the one humanity statement. I know that everyone didn't agree with that, but there's a statement with regards to that. Other examples of co-curricular and co-curricular mentoring and modeling of biblical ethics and civil discourse about issues related to justice, race, and ethnicity. Once again, the Conscience and Justice Council has always believed in the biblical foundation of social injustice, which is plenty, but also as relates to forms of oppression, which Venetia will talk about later. It says sample policies and procedures that exemplify. I want you to understand it says sample. It doesn't say that they're going to actually do it. Result of annual surveys on the sense of belonging and utilization of findings to guide institutional initiatives. Results from items regarding diversity and exit interviews and surveys. Retention rates disaggregated by race and ethnicity. Once again, these are the Adventist Accreditation Association new guidelines, and there's a suggestion that these new guidelines, because They're trying to focus on the three angels message, back to what Pastor Jay was saying earlier. The three angels message is not just the first angel, but it's also the second angel. And we got to come out of Babylon. And folk, we got to understand, when we take the word such as wokeism and try to use it to malign diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, this creates a problem. And this is the spirit of Babylon, talking about wokeism, which is a civil rights term to be politically and socially conscious, but to use it to marginalize and to, how can I say, amplify the culture wars that are taking place in this country is wrong. It's wrong and needs to stop. And that is a crying shame, because, and we will see in our church history, where we have continued to follow the world instead of being the light that makes a difference. But before we get into our church history, it's imperative that we have a clear understanding of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about. And we're here to have our DEI expert, attorney in her own right, none other than the illustrious Venetia Sazelle. And Venetia, we'll have you go ahead and talk about these items as we put them on the screen, so people can understand what they are.
Well, and I think, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Dr. Ray, for bringing up those issues. I think particularly when we talk about doing something because we allowed a previous president to do something the way we did before, just like with anything else, we do need to be mindful and careful of that, because as was stated by some of the other panelists, what you leave yourself for is an environment ripe for a lack of neutrality or unbiased. So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, as you stated, it's one of the flagships that Andrews advertises, that it's one of the most diverse universities. But there's a three parts to that equation. You have diversity, you have equity. So our panelists here, we have all minority panelists, so to speak. We're all Black people, but I mean, that's diversity within it itself. How do we then go a step further to guarantee whether or not there is also equity and inclusion? I believe that oftentimes gets confused because people don't understand it, and then we merge these wokeism. We want to put the negative impacts or disparagings of Black Lives Matter potentially, and kind of loop it all in together. And also from a legal component, I think another thing with institutions of higher education and businesses is with the overturning of affirmative action, for example. That's also a confusion that somehow equates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're not synonymous. And the reason why, again, is diversity is just our differences and being able to leverage those differences. And that's really not even the first step that an educational institution needs to start at, or organization. It's making sure that you have equitable and fair practices. You're inclusive to then allow for these diverse groups of people to have a sense of belonging. I think the most simplest form that I can explain it, I was in a situation where someone said to me at my organization, well, why can't we just hire, like what we've been doing? We've been making an effort to hire more brown people and people of color. Won't that fix, our DEI initiatives and our efforts? And they said, well, is this a safe space for me to discuss it? And I said, it absolutely is, as long as it's a safe space for my answer. So it was a Caucasian person that I was speaking with, and it was another Black male in the room. And I said, I'm going to have a party. I'm having a get together, and I want to invite you guys and invite a couple of people there. And so the other individual was like, okay. And I said, but I do need to let you know that I speak Swahili, and this other gentleman here that looks like me, he speaks Swahili as well. And everyone else at the party is going to be speaking in that language. And so, there was a pause and a ponder, and I said, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you that all of the food choices are going to be in Swahili, and the music is also going to be in Swahili, and they looked at me and said, well, what am I, what am I going to eat? How am I going to know what to eat? And, am I going to be able to participate in anything if everyone else speaks a different language and if the entertainment is in a different language? And then I smiled, and they said, well, why are you smiling? It just doesn't really seem fair that I would be coming or even invited because I'm not going to be able to participate. Well, we had diversity, as you suggested. We should stop there because, we have people from different ethnic groups. But no, that's the problem when you just stop there. Because in my hypothetical or my example, you can't participate to the party. And just because I gave you an invitation doesn't mean that I really wanted to include you. Because I made sure that the language that we were speaking, it wasn't one that you spoke. You weren't able to eat the food. And again, you couldn't participate in the entertainment. And so when we talk about equity, well, where's the fairness? How is that equitable for you to attend this party that you really can't participate in? And I said, I'm going to take it a step further. When I explain to my children, I have a 6 and a 9-year-old, and I try to help them understand what is diversity, equity, and inclusion. My 9-year-old dubs himself as Jackie Robinson. He loves baseball, so I said, I got you. I got my perfect example for you. We all get tickets to a baseball game. But they say the first part of the game, you have to watch and stand outside from the gate. And I'm sure some of you have seen this illustration. It wasn't initiated by me, but I took it and figured how to break it down for my child. You get the baseball tickets to the game. I get a baseball ticket. Your little sister gets a ticket. Daddy gets a ticket. Daddy is 5'10". I'm 5'3". You are 4 foot. Your sister is 3 foot something. The fence that we have to watch this game over, it's a 6-foot fence. And so we're all wondering, well, how are we going to see? None of us are tall enough. So they give us stepping stools to be able to see. Well, when Daddy gets the stepping stool, he is absolutely able to see over the fence. I can't see, you can't see, and your little sister can't see. And he says to me, well, that's not fair. How is that fair? And I said, well, it is. They gave us all the same tickets to go and see the same game. And he's like, I don't understand how you're telling me that's fair because only Daddy can see the game. They gave all of us the same stepping stool, but it doesn't matter because if you give him and I the same stool, it still doesn't put me to the height. I won't be able to see the game. And I said, yeah, that's not fair. That's the equity part of it. And I think when we have these discussions, it's imperative that you break it down and you humanize it. Because oftentimes what happens is if it's not me, it's more so a haves and a have-nots. That's kind of not my problem. When we take it out of the realm where we're specifically making it just about race, gender, some of the things that we're going to talk about more, the highlight ones where no, this is a my issue today, but certainly can be your issue tomorrow, and breaking it down and showing, listen, this is a situation where, yeah, you can hire or you can have more brown students and people from different demographics, but how do you keep them? And why would you even encourage them to come if they don't feel that this is a sense of belonging, because this is not really a fair or equitable environment? And although you're hosting and you're inviting them out, that they do not really feel included, because an invitation is not an inclusion. And I think, again, just making sure that we have an understanding that this is a 3-part test. It's a 3-part component. You don't just stop at the D. It's the D, the E, and the I. We need all of them together to be able to have that true sense of belonging. I also think that we should note, again, unfortunately, there are circumstances where DEI efforts have been, in essence, weaponized, and taking it back out of that realm, that DEI is not, it's not just for women, it's not just for brown people, it's not for just disabled people, it is for all people. It could be your white male from up north. it doesn't matter. It has an effect on all of us. So it's an issue for us as not really a black, white, purple, pink, like your traditional race issue. It's a human race issue, because some shape, form, or another, you're going to encounter differences, and making sure that those differences are welcomed, they're not blocked, and that they don't create what we refer to as overt or covert biases. So we don't have a situation where there are implicit biases, or we create environments where it's okay for microaggressions. Because, as someone said before, when we don't have these checks and balances in our leadership, it trickles to our administrative staff and certainly to our students. Another area that we definitely need to look at when we talk about what's going to be our call to action and our change. Every institution and organization, there is a business case to it. What is the statistical data as far as when these DEI efforts were implemented? What type of growth and development that we have with our student? What is with our students? What are the statistical data on how many students were accepted or admitted in, how many matriculated out that were from very diverse backgrounds? And when we're having these conversations going with that data, so you start off with what rules, like what governing laws or anything of that nature were violated. Let's have that discussion. And once we move to that discussion, then incorporating the components of how really is diversity, equity, and inclusion beneficial, not only to the institution, but also from a biblical standpoint. And I know we're going to delve into that further, but taking all of those components, adding them together, and then coming to the table and having that discussion as to where is it that we really want to go? What were the intentions? And getting an answer on what the intentions were behind these drastic changes. Are we in a situation where we have allyship from the student organizations and groups, from churches, from our local churches, from our conferences, all the way up to our general conference? How far and how willing are we wanting to go with having this open dialogue and discussion, and really having those hard truths as what are the potentials? Because is it that you do want to continue to say, yep, we are a school that we promote diversity, but are you in essence saying that you do not promote equity and inclusion? And are you comfortable with going on the record saying that you're not interested or willing to fulfill components 2 and 3? So I think basically looking at it from a global standpoint and remembering it's 3 parts to it. It's not just your D. You also need the E and the I to get to the B, the belonging component of it. When we also talk about looking at, in addition to the stakeholders internally, like within our body, what about externally? What about different companies and organizations that provide sponsorship? Are they going to still have the committal to your institution, knowing that, yep, you support the D, but you're really not in support of the E and the I? And I will hand it back to one of our other panelists.
Okay, Venetia, can we talk about the forms of oppression? I like the balance and things because you did the DEI, which we needed first. But you mentioned that it's not just race. Every time they hear DEI, it's just an automatic trigger for race, and it's more than that. And if you can explain these as I put them on the stage, that will be helpful.
So we are all definitely familiar with racism, right? So that is based off of someone's race, demographic backgrounds, things of that nature. I think that's pretty common. That's one of our heated ones. And it's one of the loopholes, right? Because people say, oh, you're just making it necessarily a black-white issue. Well, it's not really that, because we've never completely, we certainly have not completely addressed it in the world. And we have not completely addressed it within our institution. So again, we're pretty familiar with that one. Classism is another sneaky one. And the thing about classism is you can have it shows up in many forms. It could be a monetary form of classism. It could be your feelings of that you are better than one group versus another group. It could be because of education, maybe even political affiliation, your socioeconomic status. So if you have a student, for example, in this realm of our discussion, when we're talking about a university, if you have a student that can pay their tuition first and second semester in full, they're going to get preferential treatment than another student who cannot pay, has to be on a payment plan, or may necessarily depend on financial aid. So student A, who can pay in advance, may be in a situation where they need to retake an exam. They will get preferential treatment to retake that examination. And student B, well, no, you're already wavering. We're not even sure if your check is going to clear and you're going to be able to come back second term. So that opportunity is not going to be available to you. Those are the circumstances that you may potentially see. And there's a plethora of other examples. When we talk about religion, that is also, you can have a negative impact or disparate treatment based off of your religious affiliations, your religious background, or you can get a heightened sense of approval and abilities based off of your religious background. This may come up because, again, we're talking about discipleship. So we cannot concretely say that all of our students are necessarily going to be of Adventist background. So I think that that's a prime example. Do we treat our non-denominational students or students that are not affiliated with Adventism different than our students who are? And it can show up in two forms. You may give them preferential treatment because you want to encourage them to come into the faith, or they may be given disparate treatment because they are not your generational Adventists, so to speak. When we talk about our sexism, heterosexism, and trans, these kind of all fall under the umbrella of gender. Now, this is a situation where, again, some type of preferential treatment based off of your sex, because you are a male or because you are a female in the nursing department. If you want a new, and a hypothetical, I'm not sure who the nursing department chair is, but typically this is a profession that is dominated by females. So we have a new nursing department chair applicant that comes in, has all of the accolades, but he is a male. And we as a body or a board decide, hey, nope, that's not going to work because traditionally this is a position that is occupied by females. And that's, again, when we do not have a checks and a balances in place, it wipes out any type of neutrality or unbiased circumstances. When we talk about heterosexism, what is your sexual choice? Now, we are aware of when it comes to this area, and when we talk about LGBTQ plus, yes, we understand what the Adventist teachings are and things of that nature. However, we still know that forms of oppression show up because it can come in a discriminatory practice. It can come up in disparate treatment, ill treatment. These individuals may be ostracized. Again, we're going to get more into the biblical component. Not only is this illegal, these things are illegal to do discrimination and oppressive practices based on this, but the essence of who we are, our discipleship and followers of Christ, it is also inconsistent. You have a circumstance where we talk about disabilities. This is under our next section. This is mental disability as well as physical disabilities. This is another hot topic area for both. But what often happens in a particular area with mental health issues, it is a difference when someone says, hey, I'm suffering from diabetes or I'm suffering from cancer. It is a much safer space versus an individual that says, I am suffering from mental health. I'm suffering from schizophrenia or bipolar. Those are other forms of oppression where you are treated differently. If you are denied of promotions, denied of even job opportunities for students, positions in student unions or student groups or things of that nature based off of your disability. It can show up in the form, again, of a mental disability or a physical disability. Making sure that there are not oppressive practices and that everyone, again, when we talk about equity and inclusion, not only is everyone included, it is certainly not fair for me to say, so to speak, that everyone has a fair opportunity to take my visual aid exam when I've identified there are students in the classroom that are visually disabled or visually challenged. And I say, nope, you cannot get extra time on your exam. And also you need to sit in the back row, just like everyone else who has the ability to see. These are not, again, not only in violation with what we believe spiritually, but they are in violation of certain due process rights, civil rights, and things of that nature. And in essence, equal protection under the law. These can come hand in hand. You do have youth oppression as well as elder oppression. The hot topic area has always been when we talk about ageism. Generally, we think that we're speaking of our aging out population. That is definitely an issue. There are oppressive forms where we talk about same thing. Are you being denied or discriminated or looked over a position or different opportunities? Are you not allowed to speak? Are you not allowed to basically give your opinion? Is it not valued? And it's the same in all of these circumstances. When we talk about elder, that is an individual that is of older age. So those discriminatory practices are being used against them because they are considered to be older than that general group that they're with. You also have it with youth oppression. Oftentimes, this is one that has been underreported, but it does exist. So you have a younger individual in a board meeting, in some type of employment in class and things of that nature, that there is some type of disparate treatment. Their ideas and opinions are not valued the same, or they don't even really get a seat at the table. When we look at all of these forms of oppression, as I said, there's many different examples and hypotheticals that they can show up in. But I think too that we need to be cognizant is, again, where we talked about earlier, just because you have an invitation doesn't mean that you're included. And what is often disguised is that you have the opportunity to get a seat at the table, or you may even get to come in the room. But if your ideas, your opinions, and things of that nature are not being valued the same or equal, and your status, those forms of oppression, that list that we've used, are being used to identify and judge and value your opinions, that's problematic, and it's a form of oppression. And not only that, just recognizing and understanding that you challenge the idea, right? And you're not necessarily challenging the person, because when we get into challenging the person, we're looking at those oppressive forms to attack an individual and silence them. And then we wipe out any type of, it's no point, even if you've had that diversity, it is not equitable, it's not inclusive, and you're never going to get a sense of belonging.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much. We appreciated you dropping those bombs of knowledge.
Wow. All I can say is wow. And wow and thank you. Because some of us were part of a meeting. Some of our guests come back in. Some of us were part of a meeting on Sunday with our faculty, with some of the faculty and staff, and supporters of Andrews University. And man, there was a feeling of oppression. When you hear some of the things that they have to deal with, some of the experiences, the dismissiveness of current leadership. Again, for me, the governance part, I'm just flabbergasted that that one person can bring so much negative energy and an entire board not say, wait a minute, aren't we God's people? Don't we believe in setting the captives free and speaking up for the oppressed and I mean, we talk about it, we preach it, we've experienced it as a people. But no, you laid it out, you laid out what oppression means. So
No, and Pastor Josiah, I just want to say this because we briefly talked before, and I know we're getting the biblical, we're gonna get there. But
We're going
we were talking before we got online. It is embedded, it's embedded in our belief system. The first form that I can think of, not to say it didn't exist, but what stands out to me is Moses. Moses was diversity, equity, and inclusion. When his adopted mother found him, she knew that he wasn't the same as her. And at some point, he also realized that he wasn't the same. He had to learn and grow in another nation, learn their ways and their means. And he used that skill set to basically deliver a whole nother entire nation. That's the basis of diversity. We've got our diversity. We have our equitable practices. She didn't treat him any differently. He was educated, fed, clothed, bathed, everything, and nurtured the same as one of their own, and they included him. And it's just kind of taking it back, just way back to the basics. And we'll touch on Joseph. I know that's coming a little bit later on.
Well, we have Dr. O'Rourke, Jason O'Rourke, and we would be remiss if we didn't have this church historian. We took too long to get him up, but we definitely don't want to stop him from getting his roll on. So, Dr. O'Rourke, thank you again for being with us. But the Adventist Church has not always been kind to the marginalized and the ostracized. And you were very kind to come to Lake Region Conference for CAP meeting and speak on those issues. You've spoken all around the world on these issues, but talk to us with regards to the history, of the church when it comes to these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why the lack of trust or the triggers that we're hearing today that are being expressed on social media may be valid.
Thank you. It's good to see you all. To my esteemed colleagues previously, wow, okay, I have to put my boots on now. Thank you, ladies, very much. So just from a church history standpoint, I think it would be important for us to recognize that, and this is not my language, this is the language of Dr. Kevin Burton, there would be no Adventism without abolition. And I think that's an important place to start. Adventism and the abolition movement of the 1840s and 50s were so connected that it was almost a seamless, the same organization that printed Adventist documents, printed abolitionist documents. Our earliest church fathers and mothers were strong abolitionists. One anecdote to serve. Joseph Bates believed that Jesus was so sure Jesus was coming that he felt it was his duty to desegregate public transportation. It was his duty to desegregate public transportation. And so when you look at that and you move forward and you come to the 1863 time period when we are standing up in the middle of the Civil War, timing is everything. And so if you believe that you are a movement inaugurated by God, when you stand up is equally as important as the fact that you stood up at all. And so 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, we stood up in the middle of the time when the nation was fighting literally over injustice. You move forward and, Ta-Nehisi Coates has a great book, We Were So Many Years. And, you have Reconstruction that took place somewhere, I believe it's like 7 to 8 years after the Civil War. And that was enforced. It's important that everybody understand that Reconstruction and the Civil War and Reconstruction were enforced by the federal government. A lot of our colleagues and peers in Adventism really believe in states' rights. And you have to understand that if you are a minority, states' rights is not your friend. The federal government is always has to enforce upon the states the issue of justice, because historically minorities have been literally the minority. But you move forward, and what we started doing, we started baptizing Southerners. Everybody knows the story. Many people know the story of Ellen White's son going down on the Morning Star down to teach people of color in Alabama and Mississippi. And we started baptizing Southerners. Well, Southerners, we were baptizing them, and we were not demanding that they change from their racist perspectives and racist practices. In fact, it was very dangerous to do so at that time. People started being threatened with death people started being threatened with death. Missionaries and their work, and Black people started being threatened with death. And so the church made an accommodation. A great paper is written by Kesia Renee Bennett. She wrote her master's thesis on Adventism and racism as it deals with resistance, accommodation, and institutionalization. Great paper. And she documents this. And what happens is that we begin to accommodate racist perspectives and practices. I'm using racism as the primary because it's the primary issue around which everything else can kind of finds itself. Because slaves were freed before women got the right to vote. I mean, that's how it worked in American society. Okay. And in Adventism, on the gender issue, multiple women were ministering. And Ellen White has a statement in which she says that the pastor's wife should get a salary just like the pastor if she's engaged with the work. So there was an ecumenical ethos to the three angels message. So you move forward and you come to like 1888, and you have the righteousness by faith movement. And they will tell you what is historically stated is that we rejected it because people thought it was cheap grace. And there were political movements going on. What they don't tell you is that Jones believed that righteousness by faith had very practical, applicable implications for people of color within the church. He did. And so it wasn't just because they rejected it on cheap grace. They rejected it because we baptized too many Southerners, and they were not about equity within the denomination. Sheaf, an older Black minister, Sheaf, and one older than him named McKinney, they both understood that the three angels message could have significant impact in uplifting the community of color. But as Sheaf says, he says, we need to wait and see how these people are going to actually apply it, because basically right now we're disappointed. I'm paraphrasing what Calvin Rock has written in his book, Protest and Progress. So they understood that the three angels message meant equitable treatment, inclusion. They understood this. And inclusion, therefore, for others as well, not just race, but just others. I'm using race as the dominant thing. Then you come to, and if you look at how we used to depict America, early 1900s. Early 1900s, we depicted America, and she was not depicted as a lamb. She was like a seven-headed monster. It's a very frightening thing to see. She was a seven-headed monster. And she had around her ankles materialism and militarism and slavery or racism around her ankles, chains. Well, and this was documented. This was stated in 2020 on Ivor Meyer's podcast, on his TV show. Ben Baker, Dr. Ben Baker, and now Dr. Kevin Burton were there. And it was stated then that we got a visit in 1916 by the government that said, the way you're talking about the state, the government, the Fed, you sound like communists. And we're going to come and pay you another visit if you don't change the way that you're talking about America. So between 1916 and 1919, we had to have an internal conversation. So that when you have this conversation in 1919 that represents Ellen White's to the church in a way that however they wanted it, that's one of the Bible conference issues. The other issue that they weren't telling us is that we had to reframe how we presented America. We had to reframe how we presented America as not being unjust. Now, we could say she was unjust. We could be theological preterists. We could say she will become unjust. Now we're theological futurists. But the present truth application of the three angels message, which would have critiqued America on her unjust behavior to women, to minorities, to the undereducated and underemployed, right? Which would have critiqued America on her injustice and would have demanded the church behave in a way that is equitable to all parties that fall within its umbrella, would have demanded that the church create a subcultural ecology in which even if the state does not provide justice, the church does. And that you see that in the first 6 chapters of Acts. You see it. Instead of us embracing that, we changed and we capitulated. We capitulated to the pressure of the state. And the entire 20th century from 1920 forward has been filled with two things significantly. two things significantly: a hyper individualized sanctification process at the expense of community engagement and community responsibility, at the expense of compassionate love expressed, and the demonizing of anything that would overturn the social order. So that when A.T. Jones in 1901 is the editor of the Review, he castigates America for her injustice. But then you come to the 1960s and you have the editor then and the sub-editor or the associate editor. They both say that anybody participating in, particularly ministers, anyone participating in civil rights, anyone participating in civil rights, right, is apostate. The entire 20th century is full of these experiences. The Lucy Byers scenario that happened in Washington is a direct result of this conundrum. The Southern, I say this with respect, I'm not trying to demonize anybody, Southern University, one of their own students has done online a documented history of some of the bigotry that goes on or has gone on down there. The mistakes that happened at Union College with the Golden Cord, the length of time it took for even the worship at Andrews to be allowed. I personally know a minister at Andrews who went to Andrews and he left because of the way he was treated by seminary theologians. All of that is because we saved our necks in 1919 and sacrificed our soul instead. The three angels message, if anybody wants to look at it, look at Babylon, because we love to say come out of her, and that's Revelation 13. Come out of her. And there's a geographical movement, a theological geographical movement. We love the exodus of Babylon. We don't like the exorcism of Babylon. And the exorcism is in Revelation 18, where you see the socioeconomic benefits that happen in Babylon. And our people, 20th century Western Adventism, has accepted the sociological benefits of Babylon, even as we demonize the political whatever it is of Babylon. But we can't demonize it too much because it's going to impact our socioeconomic privilege. And that is the tension that we find. We find it. So our people don't even understand that they are sociologically Babylonian. They don't understand it. They think that they're theologically redeemed. But in their theopraxis, they pull moves like this. They'll justify it, but theopractically, it's Babylonian. And there's really not you can tap dance all over the place, but you can't get past the fact. You can't get past the fact. A call was made, a position was created. You include and we celebrate that we are the most diverse campus in the nation. So we want the work, we want the money, we want the ideation, we want the resources, we want the prayer, the singing, we want the worship. But we don't want to address your experiences. We don't want to see your tears. We don't want to address your perspectives. We may not even want you in the room. So if I want something from you, but I don't necessarily want you, that by any other name is called exploitation. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss. Like, I was not surprised by the maneuver when I heard what happened after the what's her name, the former president, when she retired, and I heard the gymnastics that were taking place. I was not at all surprised, because our people are sociologically Babylonian, and until we are willing, until I am as a man, am willing to embrace the fact that I am sociologically patriarchal and that I need to submit to Jesus. Until I, as a man, have to understand that I must love all people. I don't have to agree with them. I must love them. Until I, as an American, can critique my government and who it supports, particularly when those people that we support are abusing and destroying other people, until I, as a Christian Adventist male, am willing to submit to Jesus, I'm sociologically Babylonian. And that's going, thank you, Bruce, Dr. Luxton. I couldn't think of her name. Thank you so much. I struggle. I struggle because we are really approaching a point. We're approaching a point. We're approaching a point. And I'm going to be quiet here in a minute because I don't really have too much more to say on this point. But the question that there's a conversation that has to happen. And I said it when I was with Lake Region, and I'm gonna say it again. There's a conversation that has to happen, and it's an assessment. There has to be an assessment. A couple years ago, there was a lady that was asked out of Georgia to leave the church because she worshiped a certain way, a little bit more expressive. Pastor got up, did a 4-part sermon, and then asked her to leave the church. That may not be the place for her. Recently, a colleague of mine, who I will not mention here, I love him dearly, was released from his position, not because he was a bad pastor, but because he was actually advocating for some justice issues. There's a conversation that we have to have. And the conversation is, it goes something like this. Will I continue to support institutions that do not have my best interests at heart or that of my children? Which conferences, which institutions, which churches, which schools, which hospitals are safe for me and my people? This is a hard conversation. It's not convenient. It's not comfortable. I don't demonize anybody. People are who they are. And I can love you at a distance, but I don't need to bring my children there. I don't need to bring my children there. The doctrine, the three angels' message, when we look at it, the centerpiece is that Babylon is fallen, which means caste is fallen, sexism is fallen, bigotry, any tribalism is fallen. It's fallen, right? All of the isms that the lawyer before me, the young lady before me, all of the isms are fallen. And it's bracketed by worshiping of God and the valuation. Ellen White says that the third angel's message is righteousness by faith in verity. And that literally means I'm treating everybody else by faith in who Jesus values them to be, not in who I see them to be. It is bracketed. Babylon being fallen is bracketed by those 2 points. I treat everybody with in the faith of Jesus, not in the faith of who I see or what I think about them. And I worship the creator who made these people. Those are the 2 things that make Babylon fallen. And if we cannot do that, then there's some identity questions we have to ask now. There are some identity questions, because in the text, in the Revelation text, in that text, when you say keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus, in the text, right? What are the commandments? What are the commandments of God in Revelation? Don't take me back to Exodus yet. Do with the commands of God in Revelation. Assess your culture and your institution based on the commands of God in Revelation. One of the commands is to come out of her, my people. Another command is to go out of her, my people. You need to exodus and exorcise. I turn it back to you.
Exodus and exercise, both and, not either or. So here's my question, Dr. O'Rourke, my friend. And it's one of the questions that I dropped in the chat for us here internally. As they say in military terms, we've got troops on the ground. Elder Woods and Dr. Ray and I were part of a meeting on last Sunday. We've got friends there. We've got family there. We've got students and staff and faculty how do we let them know we stand with them? Or is this the time? Is this the time to tell them, like the angels told Lot regarding Sodom and Gomorrah, to come out of her? I mean, give us some counsel, if you would, or if anybody else wants to jump in, even our DEI officer who's here. What would your advice be?
So yes, thank you for the question, and thank you to my illustrious colleagues, and for that question. I think there are two things. One, if you're in the court, then act like you're in the court. Okay, and this is what I mean. And I'm using the Bible anecdotally. Esther thought she was safe in the court, while her people were about to get handled outside. If you have access and you have privilege, then you use it. Nobody can stand with Esther. Nobody can stand with Esther. She must stand for herself. And I think, and I'm going to say this with respect to those that have access and privilege, I think that some of us are a little bit too comfortable. And we're waiting on somebody else to stand where we've been placed. There are some, I'm being very, very pragmatic. Dr. Ray cannot stand with people at Andrews. They must stand on their own. She can call them, she can encourage them, but they must stand on what is right. And as Esther says, if I perish, I perish. But everybody will have a hill that they must stand on, a line that they must draw in the sand. Everybody has that hill and that line. Everyone must make that decision. But I think that there are people, I think so there are some of us, I do believe, while others are standing, others need to be, and this is just me, I believe this, we need to be withdrawing and creating. Don't just withdraw and go hide. Withdraw and go create. I've asked this question innumerable amount of times, and I'm sorry I'm so expressive. I realize I'm just a little bit animated.
Go ahead.
I've asked this question innumerable amounts of times. I do not understand why Oakwood does not have a production company. I do not understand why it does not have a publishing company. Just those two things alone would boost the economic and social value of that institution by light years. We are known for singing. Since Alma Blackman, we are known for that. What are we going to do with Pine Forage? We have two institutions. What are we going to do with them? Why do we keep expecting people who do, and I say this with love and respect, there are people that do not know the history as we know it. So be it. I don't demonize you for that. But does that mean that I have to trust you? Does that mean that I put my children in the place that I know consistently marginalizes children like mine? That does not sound like wisdom to me. That sounds like hopefulness. And it's hopefulness in hoping in what? Hoping in who? We have a problem, and I'm done after this. I'm gonna be quiet. We expect God to change people's minds the way that he split and part the Red Seas. And the problem is that if God changed people's minds the way he parted the Red Sea, he would destroy them. If God treated us with creation power, he would destroy us. And so God has to use salvific power, and that is Jesus, which means we have the right to make a decision. And if you're hoping in other people to do right when they have demonstrated that they consistently lean towards something else, you're expecting God to change what they may not decide.
Mercy.
And that may not be wise. It may be you are offering yourself as their sacrificial lamb once again.
My Lord.
And to my people, my question is, how long?
How long?
How long will you be somebody else's sacrifice? I'm done.
Well, the thing that's so interesting is we forget, we think Christianity is a white man's religion. We know that's not true. In Africa, C.E. Bradford has written a book about our Adventist roots in Africa, but we also forget about our pioneers. I mean, our pioneers, as eloquently stated Dr. O'Rourke earlier, were very vocal, very against the grain when it came to speaking truth to power. And they were not loved by society. And so I appreciated Michael Campbell, as you know, has 2 books out on
Oh, I think we just lost our host. Are you all hearing me fine? Okay, so we're gonna let he's back.
All right, I'm not sure what happened. The
It's the
1919, the
internet.
untold story of Adventism's struggle with fundamentalism, and 1922, you talked about that. And so when we take a look at our history, when you look at 1886, First Church, which is in Washington, D.C., was racially integrated from its origin in 1886. 1886, our church, racially integrated in D.C., divided along the color line in 1902, and became the precursor to structural institutional racism in the Adventist church. And this is interesting. This information comes, I'm going to put it on the screen so you can look at it for yourself, from Change Agents. Doug Morgan, who is the author of Change Agents, shared this information in his book in terms of how we were able to get some of the stuff that is taking place in our church. And he says it right here on page 24, 25, that the precursor institution came in 1902 after the church was racially integrated. And he said the things that Washington Training College, the Sanitarium, and Tacoma Park would not welcome Black people. We referenced to Lucille Byard. But he also said funding for the endeavors of the People's Church, which is now known today as DuPont Park, to spearhead development of parallel institutions to serve Black people in the city would be deferred for a specified period. In other words, delay, delay, delay. Or what is it that they say? Let's pray about it. I mean, they have weaponized prayer for inaction. Or what do they say? We'll get back to you. Or what do they say? Why don't you come back to us at another time? And these same type of excuses. You hear the other thing you hear for a lot of inaction is like, can you forgive me? Can you offer a little grace? We're going to keep the same decision that we made. We're not going to change our minds, but can you give us some forgiveness, and can we move on? We're always expected to move on, move on, move on, move on after these triggers of institutional racism, which have been in place for well over 100 years in our church. And there's not a commitment to change. We have these start and stop endeavors, but no commitment to change. I applaud Dr. Luxton for what she did at the Village Church. Speaking of the Village Church, that happened there. I mean, that was unbelievable. I got to give credit to Don Livesey, the union president, who came to Lake Region Conference camp meeting. But it seems that they did these things on their own, but the institution, as it relates to their respective boards, have not shown a commitment as to where they stand on these issues. And as a result, they do not continue. And that, my brothers and sisters, is the greatest travesty. I don't blame the president. I blame the boards. I blame the boards because they are responsible for the institution policies and practice. They are responsible for governing. They are responsible to ensure the mission and the visions being fulfilled. And they are responsible for the core values of the institution that continue to wait, that we have to continue to deal with. You spoke about Lucille Byard, W.G. Turner, General Conference Vice President for North America at the time. As you know, NAD wasn't a division until 1980, to calm things down. And then Dr. O'Rourke, Pastor Josiah, how would you tell people after what happened to Lucille Byard after moving from Washington Santa Freeman's Hospital. Think it not strange. Could you imagine that's the text that they used? Think what kind of theology are we using that would suggest to think it not strange when you go through these trials, trying to suggest that what happened to Lucille Byer, you should expect not as a Christian, but as a Black person who happens to be Adventist, this should not be strange to you when we treat you incorrectly. What type of theology? Help me, Dr. O'Rourke. Help me, Pastor Christian Josiah, that would think that is sound to be preached from a pulpit at the 11 o'clock hour to calm some things down.
So I'm gonna let Dr. O'Rourke respond, and then Attorney Renisha wants to jump in.
It is a significant problem to come at somebody and say that, but that is because you have already accepted the fact that creating a subculture and ecology of biblical justice is not your job. So when you actually believe the narrative that the empire is of God and that the empire is Christian, then you expect ethics, morals, and justice from the empire, and therefore you suspend your own responsibility to do the same. And so, again, when the Bible says you shall experience tribulations, etc., and that's Jesus's words, when he says you will have tribulations in the world, he says it in the world. Listen to this now. In the world you will have tribulation. That's what he says. In the world you will have tribulation. So if I'm experiencing worldly tribulation in the church, am I in the church? Because if what the world's policy says is correct, is biblically incorrect. If the way that the world does justice is actually injustice, if I'm experiencing it in the church, am I in the church or am I in the world?
That's a good question, Doc. That's a good question. Go ahead, Attorney. I think you're muted. There we go.
It's a couple of things, and it's piggybacking on some of the things that were already said. Certainly, I mean, if you have affluence without influence, it's a complete waste. And really it goes back here too, is what is the allyship? And when we talk about having these discussions, they're excellent. I think they must continue. But what is the call of action? What are our measurable goals? What are the next steps? Because when we talk about the example that you just raised, with the position that the church took, bottom line, call a spade. It's dehumanizing. And we have continued with this dehumanization. So when you also when we pose the question, well, what's next? Well, how much longer do we continue with the dehumanization? Is it a favor? Are you helping me? Is it a handout? And if I've gotten the favor and the help and the handout, I now have the ability to produce my own. And so what are we moving forward to the next steps and actions towards? Okay, it definitely calls for a conversation because there's still people there. I'm biased because I'm an Oakwoodite. However, I have a sister-in-law, a brother, father, all graduates of Andrews University. I have family and friends, so it's still a vested interest. And when we have our young people coming up, your two choices, you should be looking at Andrews and Oakwood. But is that really a question that you pose to them? And again, the affluence and the influence, what are our other options and what are we promoting as far as, are we continuing to take the hands out and the hands up, or are we going to produce for ourselves so that we're not kind of staying complacent in the dehumanization?
That's good. That's good. I think someone I really respect, a professor at Oakwood, shared as we were talking about this program, that this conversation, one of the things that pushes the needle sometimes is this issue becoming publicized. In other words, when you shine the light on in certain spaces, rodents tend to run from the light. Now I'm not into PR, so I don't know if others will get, news organizations to carry forward kind of what we've shared tonight. But just this conversation alone in a public space, um, sharing the details of what it means to be oppressed, and not being heard, not being valued, from every angle, from the DEI angle, from the biblical angle, and all the other angles that we've shared tonight. It's a good start, but it's certainly not the end. Like I said, because we have a lot of us have friends and family up there, and I would like for them to have a place to go to, before um before there has to be an alternative. Praise God, they are alternatives, that are good alternatives, because at some point you got to start wondering, can you actually fix, or do people even see the need? Most of the time people will not change unless they feel there's a need to change. I've had friends that have to go through programs. You have to admit what you are, before you can get the help that's necessary. And so, good questions. Good questions. Anybody else?
Well, I think the other thing that's being left out, and you feel this from the faculty and the staff, and I think this quote from Dr. King from the Montgomery bus boycott kind of sums it up. There comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression, over and over and over and over and over again, same game, different players. Or we have to have the coded language. Ian Haney Lopez has a book entitled Dog Whistle Politics, and people are tired of the coded language that keeps coming up over and over again, and we continue to kind of talk about that. We got to do a reset. We have to get back to God. Is this coded language that kind of distracts us from dealing with the issues that this church has when it comes to forms of oppression. And although we have seen some Dr. Nick Miller share what's going well at Washington Adventist University, this needs to be a total takeover by the church. And it needs to start at the general conference level. And, you've heard the conversation, you've heard some things, and, people love Andrews. We want to see Andrews succeed. But if you want to do something, write an email. Here's the president of Andrews. Send an email to him. Share your concerns. There's no reason, as a world changer, that's what the institution is, and the flagship, share your concerns. We always talk about stuff, but there's no action. Here's the president's email address. Share your concerns and write him a note. If that's not good enough, in addition, send it to the board chair. Here's the board chair's email address. Write him a note. Let him know. We are a lay-driven church. And so many times we forget the role of laity and the power that it holds. We do not elect people to do whatever they want for 5 years, then come back and seek our vote again in a representative democracy. We lay people have a responsibility of holding our leadership accountable. And if we have problems with the leadership, it's our fault because we are the ones not holding them accountable. We got to hold them. You're not happy? Here's the email for our general conference president. Send him a note. There's no reason for anyone to be afraid, to be scared, to send notes to them. They are human just like us. They are sinful just like us, and they can be respectfully challenged and constructively challenged, and send them some notes about what's going on. Well, you know what? I don't want to just do that. You're saying maybe I want to sign a petition. Well, you know what? There's a petition that has been created by none other than Timothy P. Nixon, who used to work at Andrews University. He's an alumnus of Andrews University and a former employee of close to 16 years, a present employee of the Seventh-day Adventist Church for over 40 years. And he has created a petition on Time Up. I repeat, Time Up, Times Up AU, Times Up AU. And we're going to put this petition right here in the chat that you can sign right here in terms of a call to action. You know, everybody says, well, what do we do next? You got to write letters. You got to put in, you can sign the petition, or you can send your own emails, but there is no reason, I repeat, no reason why our leaders should not expect, I repeat, not expect to hear from us. We can do that. We have put in the various articles that were referenced in the during the discussion in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or whether you're on YouTube. You can pull those articles, but don't leave here with the knowledge of our guests and not do anything. Inaction is worse than is the worst thing you can do. We have people, as Dr. Josiah has already said, on the front lines, the faculty, the students. We've seen the picture. I got to see if I can put it up, but there's a picture of the students who saw the etching came down and were very disappointed in what was taking place at Andrews with regards to the etching of the diversity office coming down, being removed while the students were in session. I mean, it's something that could have waited during the break. They already made their decision. There was no to add pour salt on an open wound, but nevertheless, that happened. Our attorneys shared the different forms of oppression, so it's much broader than race, but we also have classism issues. You know, we still have issues where we're referring people to other choice churches based on the color of skin. These are realities, not just at higher education institutions, but taking place in the fabric of the church and not being addressed. And we, as lay people, you and I, those that are here, have a responsibility to speak up and ensure our voices are heard.
Amen. 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 Dr. O'Rourke dropped something in our chat that I want to share publicly. Quote from Thomas Jefferson: "The price of liberty is eternal vigilance." The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. What's that song? You know, won't stop, can't stop. Like this is something that we must do. We must continue to advocate for justice outside of our institutions. You know, I mean, we can talk about systemic racism and oppression outside, but also inside. We're called to be truth tellers, both to those who are outside of the religious bounds and inside of the religious bounds. And so I think that we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do with this conversation, and then the next steps of writing that Dr. Woods shared, petitions, and I've said it. I said it in a video a few months ago. The power is with the people. Dr. Nixon just mentioned it. Saba mentioned it earlier. There's a board of trustees, and I dropped, for those who are in the comment section, I dropped the board policies in there. No board should just give up their governance and their authority. A lot of these decisions that are, and that's not just in higher education, y'all. That's everywhere. I have a governing board, an executive committee that can hold me accountable. I have constituents that can hold me accountable as a conference leader. Every leader should have some entity that is accountable to. And when you give that up, what they say, kingly power corrupts. Absolutely. And so anyway, I'm gonna turn it back over to Dr. Woods for any final thoughts as we get ready to wrap up soon.
Well, once again, we want to thank our outstanding guests. We are so privileged and honored to have both of you with us today. And we just want to give you an opportunity to close us out with any final comments before Pastor Jay and I promote our upcoming Conscience and Justice Council annual convention for 2024. Venetia, any final remarks?
Nope. I think I'm glad to have had the opportunity. It was great discussions, and just remembering, D plus E plus I, is going to equal that belonging. And also, it doesn't matter what background, what field, like we all have a voice. Everyone has a voice, no matter how small or how big. And if you don't have, when we talk about allyship and, aligning as troops, if you do not have finances to dedicate to this cause, then donate your time. If you don't have the time necessarily, donate your thoughts and your ideas or lend an ear. Just remember that there is always some shape or form that you can provide some assistance for this movement and issue.
Dr. Courtney Ray.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Dr. There she is.
I've been having some issues with my internet connection. Not sure what that is. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go to Dr. Jason O'Rourke.
On this topic, I read this quote all the time because I think that we need to be prepared. I think that the recent trajectory post our 44th president of the country demands that we have real honesty about things. And so here's the quote that I leave with people as we move forward, considering our church, and it's on your screen. There will be slavery again, just as verily as it has been, only upon a basis that is more favorable and secure to white people. That is Ellen White in 1907. If you have exodus, if you have people in your life or yourself and you have exodus Babylon, but you have not exorcised Babylon, this statement will catch you off guard. And that reality will catch you off guard. We do not have the luxury of a pie in the sky, wishful assessment of our current state. We have to look at that for what it says. If you think she had any insight at all, and you look at any current history, and you look at the trajectory of things that took place, even the president of the GC had to be corrected in 2020 by the regional presidents when he said, don't worry about, and I'm paraphrasing, don't worry about social justice, just be about the three angels message.
Yep. That's real.
I rest.
Rest well.
Babylon must fall. Must fall. Babylon must fall. All right. Once again, this has been. I'm sorry, Dr. Ray.
Dr. Ray.
Yeah, I was having some
technical
issues. My internet was going in and out, and I missed some of the closing statements that were said. But I trust, and I know that they were absolutely on point. I'm just so happy that we have talked about the fact that DEI is not just about race, even though we are the ones who often show up. I want to just really make sure that people understand that this is not just a black and white issue. This is an issue for all people to be able to recognize the value in all people. Each and every one of us has a modicum of privilege, and we have the ability to use that privilege for the best of our ability to help other people. And if you are anti-DEI, what does that mean that you are? Are you pro-exclusion? Are you pro-inequity? Are you pro-homogeny? What is it that makes people fearful of DEI? I don't really understand. And everybody needs to recognize that this is something for all of us. It's something that helps all of our students, all of our faculty, all of our staff to work to the best of their ability when they are valued, when they are treated with respect, when their needs are met, when their voices are heard. And we should want to promote that in the spaces where we are and where we promote Christianity. We didn't have a lot of time to talk about sort of the mental health applications of DEI, but we know that when people feel valued and when people feel seen, when they are represented, they do better. A lot of people have said we should just be concerned about metrics of students and student achievement. This goes straight to the heart of student achievement, because when you feel that other people have your best interest at heart, when you feel that you are safe, when you feel that you are represented, you will do better. This is not just rhetoric. This is something that has been proven time and time again through different studies, through different just all these different case studies of individuals and communities as a whole, to know that DEI is helpful for everyone to be able to succeed. And so even if you feel like, oh, well, this is an issue for those people and not for me, trust and believe you, no matter where you are or what demographic you are also impacted. You are also affected. And we need your voice also to be a part of saying that this community, not just Andrew's community, but our church community, our overall institutional community, needs to be a community where everyone feels as if they can have a seat at the table. So I just want to encourage people to recognize themselves in this battle as well, to make sure that equity is something that all people are able to enjoy. And lastly, I did an article just this past week for Spectrum. I'm a columnist. I do a monthly one. And I talked about who's not in the room when it happens. And I specifically left out race because we often think that it's just about race, but it's about everyone. And I want us to really understand and really recognize that, because if you don't want to speak up on this issue, when it comes time for something that you are now being threatened by, there might not be anybody left to speak for you. So just want to encourage us to have that desire to speak up for everyone.
Dr. Ray, thank you so much.
Amen.
Thank you so much, because that mental wellness is so important. Mental wellness is so important. And one of the things that Michael Nixon says respectfully, if it took a viral video, consistent pressure and specific timeline tied to demands to create the position, it will take even more than emails to reinstate it in the current climate. So, once again, it's not gonna just happen overnight. It's gonna take consistent pressure in the timeline. So I'm saying, make this your Christmas gift. Make this your New Year's resolution to continue to send letters, to sign the petition, to look at who's on the board, and make sure and make your voices heard, because that is so important in the times that we're living in, is that people hear the voices, hear your voice, and hear what you're standing up for, and know where you are. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this reality is going to continue to happen. It's not going to stop because we want it to stop. And what I'm going to do for you, I'm going to also give you a list of the board in the email, so you might know members of the board who can help you. I repeat, who can help you, that you may know, that can speak to these issues, and you can click in your comments that to get the members of the board for yourself. Always showing up some information, and then here is the list to the board. It's also there. If you know members of the board, you can write. But once again, it's going to take writing. It's going to take action, and using your sphere of influence, not just for today, but also for tomorrow, because we're sending our kids and people to Andrews. I have a son at Andrews Academy right now, and the future of Andrews is always going to be important, but it's also going to speak to the integrity as in terms of our practical application of the Bible. And we've already had enough of that going on, unfortunately, in the era of COVID and critical race theory and some of the other things that are coming out of one of the churches there in Berrien Springs. We don't need this continual focus of the distortion of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because we see it as being political and not moral in nature. This has been the CJC Today with your co-hosts, Christian Josiah and Edward Woods III. We would like to thank our guests once again, Venetia Sazel, Dr. Jason O'Rourke, and Dr. Courtney Ray for coming on, dropping knowledge bombs all over the place from a diverse experience perspective as it relates to systems of oppression, DEI and You. Once again, DEI impacts all of us, not just people of color. So please make sure that when you go back and listen to the broadcast, you listen to what D plus E plus I and how we need all three, not just one, but you also look at the forms of oppression to get to B, which is belonging. And then you want to get to forms of oppression as they're outlined. It's not just racism, but classism. And classism is very real in our state conferences. You hear about it all the time. Very real in our state conferences, as well as our regional conferences. But we hear about it, especially when it comes to people of the same race. We hear a lot about that. That still needs to be addressed. And once again, remember the history. Dr. O'Rourke shared with us the history. We appreciate that. And then Dr. Courtney Ray gave us the background of what's taking place at Andrews, but then also was able, and we appreciate you coming despite the technical challenges to join us over and over again. Thank you for that. The mental health awareness. And that is so, so important in these days and time, this mental health awareness, especially coming out of COVID. That's not something that we should be taking lightly with regards to that. So I hope what was shared today made a difference. And I ask you to continue to pray for Andrews University, its board of trustees, and its leadership, because we all want to get to heaven. This is not a demonizing effort, but a constructive effort and a call to action to ensure the things that have happened in our church in the past do not continue in the future. This should be an Ebenezer. This shouldn't just be a rallying cry until the next crisis. This should be an Ebenezer. This should be a pivot where our church says, we are going to do better, and this is what we're going to do better and sustain it, not because of who's in the president's seat, but because we as a board own the values of the institution and making a difference in a shared governance model with the faculty who continue to give their blood, sweat, and tears to ensure student success who come to Andrews. Before we leave, we want to promote, I repeat, we want to promote our upcoming Conscience and Justice Council convention 10 years after Ferguson, walking or talking. And that's the same thing we want to talk about with this incident. 10 years later, are we walking or talking? And this is a metaphor, not just for Ferguson, but also for ableism, also for genderism, also for sexism. Are we just walking or talking as it relates to the discrepancies in our various systems of oppression? What are we doing about it? September 18th to 22nd in St. Louis, Missouri. And we're going to turn it over to the host to talk about this and then close us out with prayer. The host for this upcoming Conscience and Justice Council annual convention is none other than Pastor Jay.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, Dr. Woods, man. We are excited to be the host conference for the Conscience and Justice Council annual convention. It's going to be in the Lou. And if you know anything about St. Louis, it's St. Louis. It's the Lou. And so come ready to learn. Come ready to share. We're going to have some excellent presenters. We'll have more details on the various workshops that will take place in St. Louis, September 18 to 22. We always do a field trip in every convention that we have, and we're going to be praying for safety as we walk the streets of St. Louis, man. And one of our churches is actually right around the corner from where the Mike Brown incident took place 10 years ago. And so for those, but don't be, I'm not trying to scare anybody out there. I pastored in St. Louis for about 7.5 years. I made it out. And you'll be all right. Don't come scared. But you know, one thing about regional conferences in particular, we've always been about that urban life. Like, we know what it's like to do ministry in the urban core and in the urban centers. And so we look forward to welcoming many of you who will come. And so save that date, September 18th to 22nd, and we'll see you there 2024. I think it would be good for us, Dr. Woods, to close out with prayer if you don't have anything else.
No, please do.
Okay. All right. Let's pray, everybody. Father God, Lord, we thank you for this conversation. We thank you for the guests that have come to share and to inspire us, Lord, to do better. Lord, all need to do better. We need to be better advocates, Lord. We need to be better agents of change. Lord, help the leadership at Andrews, Lord, to be converted and convicted to do better. Lord, be with the staff and the faculty who have been, and the students who have been affected and disaffected. Oh God, Lord, I pray that you will pour out your spirit on them and encourage them, Lord. Remind them, Lord, that there is still no weapon even created in our own institutions that's formed against us that can prosper. We are more than conquerors. God, oh Lord, I pray that you would be with us as a church. Forgive us, Lord, when we have not done what we should do. Forgive us when we have taken your name in vain, called ourselves Christians, but we have not lived what we know about. Lord, I pray that we will be Christians not only in name, but in word and in deed also. Bless those who are part of this conversation in the chat, Lord. I pray that you thank you for them joining us, and bless us, Lord, as we leave this space and this place, but never from your presence. Continue to give us that double portion of your Holy Spirit so that we can be agents of change wherever we are. As my mentor always said, may we brighten the corner and brighten the corners where we are. We ask these mercies in Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen.